have you ever wondered what it might be like to live life on another planet? Because according to mainstream science, there's anything from 200 to 400 billion planets in the Milky Way. That's our galaxy alone. And there are anything from 200 billion to 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. And that's just the observable universe. So what about the great beyond? If we're living in this infinity, then it's a no-brainer, isn't it? There's life everywhere. And of course, we're talking about physiological life, because life itself is nature. Nature is visible spirit. Spirit is invisible nature. All is mind. The universe is mental, if you're familiar with the natural laws, the Hermetic principles. But really, what I'm interested in is, do people actually think about this on a daily basis? Because it kind of amazes me. We've got all these distractions around us. We spend so much time in buildings that if you think we have the capacity to perceive stars, which are really like light years away, but we spend our time, it kind of conditions and incarcerates our minds to seeing just walls that are approximately 3, 4, 5, 6 meters away from us. And this trains the mind to not really entertain and engage in philosophy. So this incredible wonder, which Socrates says is the beginning of philosophy, is lost to us. Instead, what could be happening is we could be, in these lovely summer warm nights, looking up into the midnight sky and seeing this incredible star show of infinity, this incredible mystery that surrounds us all. And in doing so, you might enter this humble amazement. You might enter this meditation where you start contemplating life on other planets, and it kind of hits you. This stimulation, this cultivation of awe is a sensation, as Rudolf Steiner knows and has stated in his work, that this is the sort of sensation that cultivates a spiritual awakening on this planet, and any planet, I would say. And I would say that this is actually what a lot of the other species are participating in and experiencing on a regular basis. Indeed, that has been the history of humanity before Western civilization. When we were much more tribal, much more connected to nature, it was something that was much more widely accepted and more well known. But of course, today we live in this excessively left-brain scientific mindset that has ultimately cultivated a culture that is paying too much attention to its immediate environments, and it isn't casting its minds into the depths of space. And so the problem with that is that, if we take someone from this civilization, let's say Aunt Beryl from down the road, who watches Coronation Street on a regular basis, I'm sure you could take her to the next planet and she'd be wondering, what time's Coronation Street on over here? Or if you take someone, who's interested in football, they'd be asking, are the aliens, what time's the game on, Where's the closest Walmart? It's because we are so used to living life the way that we currently live it that we can't even conceive of another way. And really, that's what New Earth is about. It's about realizing that, hey, there are an infinitude of possibilities ahead of us, and we can live in any culture that we want to exist in. And I would say, absolutely fundamentally, we all should be experiencing more freedom, abundance, well-being, so that we can actually look up into the night sky and have more time to wonder, to contemplate, to stimulate our curiosity, which is there innately from childhood. It's just that it's extracted from Western education by way of this convergent education system that fractures the mind and renders it incapable of comprehending the whole, the holistic, right? The Holy Bible. This is holism, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, as Rudolf Steiner said. And also, this is really what the Humpty Dumpty thing was all about. But we can get into that in another video. But what I'm really saying in this video is that wonder cultivates awakening. And it's that exactly that we need to return to, as is known in some of the religions. Be like children, be more like this childlike nature that is asking questions, and realize that the question is more important than the answer. Because often what happens when we think about these potentially, foreign civilizations, thousands and trillions of light years away, we often think of technologies like flying cars or time travel and things like that. But what if actually the more developed a society is, the less technology it needs, because the more it understands the true nature of reality? And this whole agenda that's taking place right now, Agenda 2030, through figures such as Elon Musk, the open AI prison coming to us courtesy of smart cities and the Internet of Things and social crediting systems, UBI, all of the stuff that we know is coming towards us. All of this would fall away when we realize that actually we can separate our minds from matter. We can ascend without technology. We don't need the metaverse. It's simply coming down to a misunderstanding of the fabric of reality itself by way of the education system that has divided us and made us think in a polarized dualistic way, when actually there's a non-dualistic nature of reality. There's this oneness that's underlying everything. And the realization that's facing all of us is that we don't actually possess life, we participate in it. And that's why I mentioned earlier that I was talking specifically about physiological life, because that's the thing that's in question, even though really, again, any sort of like contemplation will yield the answer. But life itself is everywhere. Everything is life. Everything is living to varying degrees of vibration. You know, spirit is invisible nature, and nature is visible spirit. Matter is simply energy condensed to a slow vibration. Everything is frequency, energy, vibration. And like when we realize this, we ultimately emancipate our minds from matter. We experience the chemical wedding. We awaken very quickly, as is shown to us in various films. And we begin to understand other films, such as Inception, where they're going through these layered structures of reality, these dreamscapes, if you like. It's sort of become a psychonaut, you know, transporting your mind through time and space. But are we actually transporting our mind through time and space, or are we space and time itself? So these are all discussions for future videos, and if you're interested in talking about these things, then I do recommend checking out newearth.land, because that is really the foundation that can create the conditions that we need to live in a society that's more conducive to philosophy and ultimately the blossoming of the human mind. Because at the moment, we're held captive down in the lower chakras, the lower mental centers. We have dormant mental faculties, principally in the neocortex. And a lot of these illumined fraternities, such as Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, know fine well how to exercise those dormant mental faculties and awaken to high levels of consciousness. So we shall be talking about, you know, the Illuminati, we shall be talking about Freemasonry and various subjects in the future. So again, do check those out in the future, do have a look for them, do subscribe, and yeah, do help the channel grow, because we're doing this ultimately for a very charitable purpose, which is to create a right to exist. So shelter, energy, food and water, they should be the foundational elements of society. There's no reason for us to charge ourselves to exist, right? The basic things we need to exist, surely those things should be decommodified and should be made into human rights. And we can do that very easily together now that we have social media, now that we're connected across the planet. You know, it couldn't be any easier than it ever has been. You know, it could happen tomorrow, but we've got to reach people. We've got to create the exposure that's required to create these more benevolent conditions in society that will transform our minds, and we shall all ascend to a higher place without the need for Neuralink and the metaverse and Elon Musk and these various nefarious characters who we shall also be making videos about in the future. So that in a nutshell is the video. Yeah, that's all I've got to say for now. See you next time.